If I have not met you yet, my name is Bobby Smith Bryant, and I'm the current president of the Calloway County Genealogical and Historical Society, and we are delighted that all of you are here today. We have a number of visitors from out of town and in town, and we are just so thankful that you decided to come today, and we hope that you will feel welcome to come and visit us again. Out of the gate, I first want to thank our sponsors that have helped make today possible. In the back, Manon and Brandy, if you all will wave. Our sponsors at the Calloway County Public Library, and Manon Reed and Brandy Reed are our hosts for the day, and so please give them a round of thanks. Also, from the Murray State University Department of Libraries, we have several folks here. I know Chris Ferguson, Jeff McLaughlin, and Susan, I'm so sorry, are from the Pogue Library and Department of Libraries. Thank you all so much for your sponsorship of refreshments after our event today. Please give them a round of applause. And then Jeremy McKeel, who is also with Murray State, is videotaping so that we can share this after today on our website that we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. Now I want to introduce the members of our Genealogical Society. We have a number of the board members of our society are here. Randy Patterson is our former president. Debbie Bell is our secretary. Janice Wilson is our treasurer. And Bonnie Snellen is our vice president. If you all will just sort of wave your hands so everybody knows who you are. And then if the members of our society would just stand, I would like for you all to be recognized. Any of you that are members of our society, please just stand for a moment. Everybody that can stand, please do. And the reason I want our visitors to see you is so if you have questions, these are people that you can talk to about our programs and the things that we do during our meetings. So thank you all very much. We appreciate that. When we undertook this World War II project earlier this year, we had about a dozen of our members that volunteered to participate in working on how to research our World War II veteran ancestors. And we began meeting monthly, and as we began meeting, we began to realize that we didn't know a whole lot about how to research our ancestors that were in World War II. So we had several members of our committee that stepped forward to help bring our speaker today. And so thank you all for your generous contribution that made this possible. Those contributions were added to some funds that we get every month from John Homa with the Rock Shop here in Murray. He supports financially our speakers program. So we want to be sure and say thank you to him and to our generous private contributors as well. Cash, if you want to come up, it's unusual for us to have to introduce the person that's going to introduce the speaker, but many of you all may not have met Cash before. Cash is Cash Kinniger, who is Rachel Flora Kinniger's husband. And of course, we know Rachel because she grew up here in Murray. But Cash is a professor emeritus of history at the Virginia Military Institute, and he retired back in 2013 after a 34-year career as a history professor. 27 years of which he spent teaching at VMI, teaching 20th century U.S. history and the Civil War, Reconstruction, and the Old South. He is a graduate of Washington and Lee University and from Vanderbilt University. His numerous publications include the Journal of American History and a Journal of Southern History. And if it were not for Cash, I'm not sure that we would have found a speaker for today. So Cash, with your help, please introduce our speaker.
Thank you. Good afternoon. You all came to hear Dr. Coleman and not Dr. Kerniger, so I'm going to be very brief. To that end, I've scribbled a few notes that I will more or less read. I hope you'll forgive that, but it will move things along expeditiously, and Brad won't have to stand there quite so long. He's been standing there a few minutes already.
Pull your mic up so you can speak just into it. Just pull it out of there.
All right. Were you able to hear anything so far? Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to more or less read my introductory comments. Please forgive that, but again, it will save you from any unnecessary rambling on my part and move the program along as rapidly as possible. Early this past summer, Rachel asked if I could offer any pointers on how to go about researching the records and experiences of ordinary members of the armed forces in World War II. Well, this was not my field, which is something that scholars like to say when they don't have answers. But it's also true. It's not the kind of research I've ever done, and so I pretty much drew a blank. But I did think I knew someone who might help. I first met Dr. Coleman when he was a mere cadet at the Virginia Military Institute. He was an exemplary student, made A's in all my courses and in other people's courses as well. I hope this is not embarrassing you. But he was the kind of student that one remembers many years afterward. He graduated with honors in 1995, which I guess dates all of us, dates him at least. I'm worse off than he is, age-wise. And he went on to earn his Ph.D. at the University of Georgia, then went to work as a diplomatic and military historian for the federal government, holding positions first with the State Department and then the Department of Defense, or at least we used to call it the Department of Defense. In 2012, he was command historian for the U.S. Southern Command when VMI somehow lured him away from government service, bringing him back to Lexington. That's the Lexington of Virginia, the other Lexington. I should tell a Kentucky audience. In order to direct the John Adams Center for Military History and Strategic Analysis, and to join the teaching faculty of the Institute as holder of the Collins Chair in Military History. And so my former student became my esteemed colleague and friend. But it seems that he has an entrepreneurial streak as well as a talent for history, because after a decade of directing the Adams Center, he left to establish his own history think tank, for lack of a better term, which he calls the Center for Applied History, with offices in Atlanta and Washington, D.C. And he now makes a living doing, among much other contract work, the very sort of research and writing which he'll be telling us about today. If I read his long list of publications, presentations, and awards, we'd be here till nightfall before he has a chance to speak, and he would get very tired standing over there in the corner. When I asked Brad if he might consider appearing in person at your October meeting, he responded, "Absolutely, I'd love to, as long as the meeting date doesn't conflict with the Georgia-Auburn game." So obviously a well-rounded fellow with his priorities in the right place. He's come a long way to be with us today. I think we're in for a treat, and with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Bradley Coleman.
So I'm going to try to stay anchored on the podium, which is a little bit difficult for me because I like to roam, but we have the recording device for the video here too. Cash, just thank you so much. Rachel, Bobby Joe, the leadership of the Calloway County Genealogical and Historical Society. It's such a privilege and it's so much fun for me to be here with you all today. So thank you so much for the invitation. Just gratitude. So my sort of interest in this work really is rooted in the stories of my grandfather. So fishing with my grandfather when I was growing up and hearing about his experience in the Army Air Forces during World War II is the foundation for this type of work for me. It's the passion that drives this work. I think we need to know something of our ancestors to understand ourselves. So incredibly grateful for this invitation. My interest in understanding the experience, the extraordinary experience of ordinary people, is rooted in these stories, became classroom activities, and now part of our professional portfolio at the Center for Applied History. So again, just thank you so much. The charge here today is a workshop. So I do want to talk with you all as much as we can about what you know about your service members here in Calloway County. But I'm going to open, if I may, just by running through a few slides here to give you a sense of sort of the landscape of opportunities for you as individual researchers and your opportunities here in this community. I do want to say too to our friends from the Pogue Library, I had a delightful morning over on campus today looking at the Forrest Pogue papers. So thank you all for all the work that you do to preserve and perpetuate that story. Thank you for being here today. So how do we do this? And so I want to begin with a challenge to y'all. There are incredible things that we can do as individuals to learn about our grandmothers, our grandfathers, great-grandfathers, great-grandmothers in World War II. But there's a larger opportunity here, I think, for this community. This is not something that we can do as individuals, but this is work that is best accomplished in a collaborative fashion. That is, think about as we work our way through this, like who are the stakeholders here in Calloway County, and how can the stakeholders come together to do something significant with an incredibly broad subject, that is to understand the impact of World War II on this community. There's a lot of work to be done for sure. This is a large research project. Even if we think about just one or two or three individuals, when we understand that there are 3,000 people from this community that served in the armed forces during World War II, it becomes a very large project. So I just want to encourage you to think about the design and implementation and then the dissemination of the results as a community building opportunity for this community. To include, but not limited to, the folks over at the university, to include the Calloway County Historical Society, for sure, but also secondary school teachers and other stakeholders here in Kentucky. So the first question to me was, like, how do we identify the people? Who served? So if we're going to design a research project and try to understand something of this place, right, by understanding the service experiences of the people from this community, like how do we even identify those people? And so many of us know, our grandfather or great-grandfather or what our grandmother did during World War II. But broadly speaking, how do we figure out what the entire body here is? And so I just want to tag a few items for the group. Rachel shared with me, and I've had some time to dig through the ledger and times. We know there are some methodological problems behind that that I think the team here has worked to address. But it is an important source. There are 2,232 individuals listed in that publication in 10 installments in 1946. There are mistakes on that list for sure, but it's an amazing resource. And recognizing, like, this community has already done a lot of work. And so what I have here today for us to think about is ways to sort of amplify and advance that work. But to begin with, the ledger is incredibly useful. I've included in the read-ahead package that I sent to the Society the honor list of World War II dead and missing. I think that is an important and useful source for us. especially as we seek to discover the stories of the service members who did not return from World War II. And then two, up at the National Archives, we'll talk about the landscape of records, but the selective service system records are up in College Park. Much of that has been digitized and they can be useful as sorted and searched by location. And then I think the student, faculty, sort of and staff records over at Murray State would be incredibly useful to try to fill in some individuals who may not be actually entering the service from Murray, but perhaps were on campus at the time that they entered service. So Rachel, this wasn't in the deck that I sent you, but it occurred to me this morning before I went to campus that something like this might be useful for us all. So we kind of need to begin with something of a basic understanding about how the armed forces are organized. So I threw this up for U.S. Army Ground Forces during World War II, and this is courtesy of my friend Kevin Hemel, who, if you know Kevin, is an amazing patent historian. I think has just finished the third volume of a 3-volume series on George S. Patton. And Kevin always starts his talks about the European theater of operations by just laying out some foundational stuff. And so I include this here with you. I think probably the next step is in creating resource guides is to understand how a Marine division is organized, understand how the Navy is organized, understand how the Army Air Forces are organized. But there are a lot of different layers to organization. So when you're searching for information on your relative, it's useful to know what you're looking for and what you're seeing and interacting with. So you have an individual soldier, a squad, a platoon, company, battalion. So during World War II, they're organized in sets of 3, right? So 3 platoons is a company, 3 companies is a battalion, 3 battalions is a regiment, and then on to a division. Corps is typically 3 to 5 divisions, Army Group in Western Europe, and then of course the Supreme Commander in Western Europe. As we're looking for unit records, what I will tell you based on my experience is that regimental records are going to be the most useful. So when we're digging through family papers, when you're looking at VMail and you see a regiment, that is an important key to opening up a larger story of that individual service during World War II. Okay, so where are the records? The records are everywhere. They're all over the place. So this can be a little overwhelming and this is not comprehensive, right? But I do want just you to have a sense of of where the principal records are located at and the different types of records. So first and foremost, and I could invert this list too, there are the things in your house, right? They're the things you know. Again, recognizing the amazing work that's already been done in this community, there is the Genealogical and Historical Society has a questionnaire or survey for service members. Like, what do you remember? What does your service member remember? So beginning in your house and then working your way out, there are amazing opportunities to learn more. The National Archives is the repository for federal records. The National Archives is not a site, it is a system. And there are National Archives branches located all over the United States. For the purpose of this research, there are 2 key National Archives facilities. The National Archives on the campus of the University of Maryland in College Park, and then NARA St. Louis, the National Archives facility complex in St. Louis, Missouri. The personnel files that you may want to request are in St. Louis. The individual deceased personnel files, so the files for all the individuals who were killed in World War II, are in St. Louis. Like, those records are really useful. Unit histories, unit records, correspondence, memorandas, orders, all that material is at the University of Maryland in College Park. All the services have their own history programs. All the services have their own archives. Many of the services have multiple archives inside of their system. So the U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center in Carlisle is terrific. But there are other Army history archives as well. So for instance, the Women's Army Museum at Fort Lee has great records on WACs, on women in the Army during World War II. The Air Force Historical Research Agency is down in Maxwell. That's where the U.S. Army Air Force records are at. That's where the originals are at. The Naval History and Heritage Command up at the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., the Marine Corps History Division down in Quantico. These service history programs are incredibly useful. So if you know that you have a father or a grandfather who is a Marine, tapping into the resources at Quantico are going to be transformational for you. Library of Congress is awesome. There are manuscript collections at the Library of Congress. There's also a vast oral history collection at the Library of Congress. Even though your relative may not have an oral history interview, it is very likely that you can find oral history interviews with people that served in that unit. And by listening to that oral history interview, you can discover something of their experience or what they would have experienced, the places they served, for instance, during World War II. So Library of Congress is great. State and local repositories, nonprofit entities. Nonprofit entities such as the National D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia. They have a manuscript collection and an oral history project. Down in New Orleans, the National World War II Museum. They have an oral history project. They have manuscript collections. The George C. Marshall Foundation in Lexington, Virginia. The Douglas MacArthur Memorial Archives in Norfolk, on and on and on. There are nonprofit entities across this country that have historical records connected with World War II and with individual service members or units that served in the war. And then college and university archives, I think, are incredibly useful. So again, there are different types of sources here, and in order to do this work, we need to move beyond secondary materials. So there are different types of historical materials. Primary sources are the type of things that were created during the time period that we're studying. Secondary sources are books and articles, works of analyses created at some later date. Oral history interviews kind of are fuzzy, but they're people's memories of what happened in the past. So these primary sources are most likely going to be the things that you can use to discover and learn more about your relatives. You can interrupt me at any point too, if you have any questions or. Okay, so we'll start with Dr. Pogue. So I had the good fortune when I was a cadet at the Virginia Military Institute. It's an elite undergraduate education in a military setting. It was just absolutely terrific. For me, I had an opportunity to work as the cadet assistant for 2 years over at the George C. Marshall Research Library. Dr. Pogue is a legend in Lexington, Virginia. He was the first director of the George C. Marshall Research Library Foundation and notable historian of 20th century military affairs. I had the great fortune of serving as Dr. Pogue's cadet escort during his last visit to Lexington, Virginia in 1994, so I enjoyed taking him around in the golf cart and making sure that he was well and properly hydrated through the visit. When I taught at BMI, my teaching portfolio included, but was not limited to, teaching World War II, and I would use Forrest Pogue to teach my students in that course and in methods classes about the role of a historian in the federal government. So what does a combat historian do? And so I had tapped into the U.S. Army records up in College Park to pull some of the Pogue field reports to describe what he was doing as a historian with U.S. Army forces in Western Europe. The Pogue papers here are terrific, and I spent a morning with it. I could spend a week here going through the Forrest Pogue collection. But he, of course, was a teacher at Murray State College, Teachers College, before going into World War II. Just a remarkable scholar, a remarkable person, and a remarkable experience during World War II as a combat field historian. At the Center for Applied History, we spent some time pulling the thread on some individuals from this community. And I will say we found remarkable material on service members from Calloway County, Kentucky. The theme for all of that, and I'll encourage you all to sort of think about this as you go through your work, is to retain the ability to be surprised. because there is a lot there. And it is geographically distributed around the earth. So you have Calloway County men and women all over the planet. They are doing a remarkable array of different things. Like there's not a experience, like a single experience for a Calloway County serviceman. They're doing everything you can imagine them doing. And so you have this incredible geographic and occupational diversity. Within that, to me, it seemed like there was an incredible opportunity for teachers in this community to latch onto some of these stories to find ways to teach the things that the state once taught in secondary schools in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So there are, again, dozens and dozens and dozens of stories. If we want to teach Pearl Harbor, for instance, we might very well begin with J.B. Bailey, who was on the USS Farragut on December 7th, 1941, and later off the coast of Saipan in the summer of 1944 on the Farragut, providing support to Marines that are landing. You've got Marines that are landing in Saipan in 1944. And that ties into the entire architecture of the operational and strategic approach to the Pacific War. And we can talk about that for hours if you want, but you have individuals that you can use and sort of then pairing those up, for instance, with the Farragut's report of action on December 7th, 1941, that you could teach that in a classroom here in Calloway County using J.B. Bailey's story. Richard Payne, a private out of Calloway County. African-American service members during World War II are limited in what they can do because of the institutional racism inside of the Army during the 1940s. So Richard Payne, for instance, is an African-American from this community. He ends up serving with the 457th Quartermaster Laundry Company. So his job, so there are limited combat opportunities for African-American service members. They get pushed into service roles. Richard Payne spends the war doing laundry for white soldiers in Europe. But the 457th records are up in College Park. Geraldine Brandon, not sure why my little taskbar is covering her up. A lot of women from this community served in the WACs or the Waves, so either the Army or the Navy during World War II. Geraldine actually enlists up in Detroit, so it may be that you get confused as to how she sort of gets into the system. But Geraldine's with the Women's Army Corps. She's with the U.S. Army Air Forces. She's at the regional hospital down in Coral Gables. So again, this is just a sampling of the tremendous diversity of occupation and the tremendous geographic sort of spread of Calloway County service members. I don't know what Geraldine looks like. I'd like to imagine she's one of these WAC personnel. This is down at the Biltmore in Coral Gables, so she was part of the WAC detachment in South Florida. I'm not exactly sure which site she was at, but the largest U.S. Army Air Force hospital in South Florida is the Biltmore Hotel. So, an important way, the charge here is to think about not only how to discover these stories, but how do we learn about the places they served. And we were talking a little bit earlier before the presentation. I think the best way to learn about the places they served is actually go visit. So I do think we need to get a team together for Coral Gables, perhaps to learn a little bit more. So we thought pickleball was a recent construct. Apparently it's not. Okay, so here I just have one or two examples, and then I want to stop and just hear from you all about your family members and think about research approaches to your problems. But here's an example, and this was, some of these materials are in the packet that I shared with the group before coming up from Georgia, but Albus Calhoun. It seems to me that we have a disproportionate number of people in the 149th Infantry Regiment. And so the 149th Infantry Regiment's a National Guard unit made up principally of Kentucky boys. The composition sort of evolves and changes. It's actually quite a good regiment. And so a lot of folks get sort of pulled out to set up other regiments. But the 149th goes to war principally as a Kentucky National Guard regiment. Serves in the Southwest Pacific area, you may know, and then is involved with the liberation of the Philippines. I know of at least 3 individuals from this community that are in the 149th. How did we get here? So if I could just walk you through this. So we had the honor list of dead and missing, and there are 39 individuals from this community who died in World War II. The individual deceased personnel files, which is a quiz, it's at NARA St. Louis, right? Many of those have been digitized. So if the last name is from A to L, you can just send an email to St. Louis after the current lapse in federal funding is behind us, and they open again. You can send an email to St. Louis, and they will send you the digitized version of the individual deceased personnel file. So A through L has been digitized, M and beyond have not. So if you want M and beyond, that requires that you be more patient, let them find the record, digitize the record for you, and then pay a small fee for that, which is fine. So I pulled, knowing that the first 5 or 6, will all be available to us easily. Calhoun came up as one of the first files that I got from NARA St. Louis. So Albus Calhoun. So I had him on the list, right? That the Army put out after World War II in 1946 with all the dead. And the dead is broken out. There's a volume for each state. And then within that, it's organized by county. So 39 individuals from Calloway County. So Calhoun, starting with a C, I knew the file was digitized. I started with the list. I ordered the individual deceased personnel file, and in the individual deceased personnel file, it indicated that he was with the 149th Regiment. So that was the first time that I found a regiment. So remember the big chart in the beginning? Knowing that you have a private in 3rd Army with Patton isn't really that useful. I mean, it's useful, but you're not going to find records connected with a kid based on Army, right? Division's really hard, but again, when you get to regiment, then all of a sudden things start to become possible that otherwise wouldn't be possible. So I knew he was with the 149th Infantry Regiment, so we pulled the 149th Infantry Regiment records up in College Park, so St. Louis, College Park, and then 2, based on what we found, which was just so amazing, we went to Navy records. That is the Armed Guard logs in Record Group 24. So again, a 1946 Department of War publication, individual deceased personnel file, unit records in College Park, and then Navy records in College Park. So when they advanced to Leyte in December of 1944, and this was very common practice, so Army troops were on Navy transport ships. The Armed Guard detachment on that ship, the crew of that ship, was insufficient by design to actually man all of the weapons and lookouts and so forth. So the Navy would pull Army personnel on the transports and have them man guns in various positions on the ship, lookouts and so forth. And so Calhoun was working a Navy deck gun while his transport ship was approaching Leyte in December of 1944. And the package that I had for the foundation, there were probably 6 accounts of December 5th, 1944 at the National Archives that we found, all of which were compelling and appalling in their own ways. But again, our ship was under constant attack throughout the day by dive bombers. The gun crews in the ship shot down 3 Jap planes. The last plane had its tail shot off and crashed into hole number 1 under the forward gun tube. And then the heroism of the gun crews who continued to maintain fire on the ships on the airplanes as the airplanes crashed into the gun emplacement resulted in the Navy folks aboard the ship recommending, I think, 7 individuals for Medal of Honors, including Albus Calhoun. Right, and so Calhoun does not receive a Medal of Honor. That is a bureaucratic process, an administrative sort of ordeal. Relatively few people do. but that the men that served with him on that ship thought that he had conducted himself in a manner to receive the nation's highest award. It tells you something about Albus County. There are several other Calloway County kids on that ship at the same time, one of whom is going to die in Luzon a few months later. Okay, Herman Roberts was another name that we pulled out of the ledger, and Rachel and I had talked about Roberts also. So again, another example of just how we strung together stories, and all these documents we'll get to y'all. But Herman Roberts was a second lieutenant in the United States Army Air Forces. In the honor list of dead and missing, there's a finding of death, which is November 26, 1944. We ordered his individual deceased personnel file from St. Louis. His last name, of course, begins with an R. That file is not digitized. So they sent us a small bill. It's not terribly expensive. We paid the bill, and then the government shut down. So at some point after the government opens up again, we're going to get for you all the individual deceased personnel file for Herman Roberts. That's not the point of this, right? So even skipping a step, which I think has crucial information that I don't have regarding the ultimate disposition of Roberts, I was able to run down the missing aircrew report, and then that gave me a squadron. So a squadron would be sort of type record for the Army Air Forces. It could be roughly equivalent to a regimental record. So once you get the squadron, you're in great shape. So we had this like 98% of the time, except this time. So we found the missing aircrew report, which is part of the records of the Office of the Quartermaster, if your head's not spinning yet, up in Washington, or up at the National Archives in College Park. Because the Quartermaster Corps of the Department of the Army has responsibilities for mortuary affairs. Okay, and so all mortuary affairs is being run by the Department of War during World War II, so Army. So the Quartermaster Corps had the missing aircrew report. We were able to pull from that the squadron and group information, and then take that down to Maxwell Air Force Base, where we were able to find unit histories. 99% of the time, the squadron records are the records that you want. So I pulled the squadron records down at Maxwell a few weeks ago, and they weren't very good. I was like, oh no. So I went up one level to the bomb group, and suddenly there were good records there. And so again, what we know is he's a B-24 navigator. Plane was shot down. There are various accounts of this incident among the records that I passed to Rachel for y'all. I don't know how his remains were recovered. So that is something that I think there's, in the individual deceased personnel file, there should be clues about the field search reports. So after World War II, the quartermaster comes in and they do a massive search of Europe and the Pacific for missing personnel. Roberts didn't get out of the plane. So at some point they must have found the wreckage of the plane and recovered enough of his remains to be convinced that they were his remains. I believe what is left of that crew is commingled in a site out of Fort McPherson. So the science at the time was such that it was, I think, impossible or difficult to disentangle commingled remains that were badly decayed. And so I think that what was left of the crew is in a group grave out in Fort McPherson. So. Okay, so again, that's a long-winded introduction to give you a sense of how to approach these type of problems. But it's something that we can do together. It's more fun as a community. I'll tell you that for sure. So I'm curious in talking, maybe pausing for a moment and opening this up to a discussion, but thinking about like how does Calloway County, Kentucky, how to do this research, right? How to build a coalition of researchers here in this community. Like how to tie in perhaps history majors over on campus, how to tie in faculty, how to tie in librarians and archivists. And then in the end, like how do we, beyond sort of capturing this, like how do we preserve and perpetuate the knowledge of the past? That is, what do we do with these stories once we have them secured? So questions, discussions, workshop. What do you have? Yes, ma'am.
You were citing the deceased personnel files.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you get personnel files for those who did come home?
Absolutely. So you can request personnel files for somebody that survived the war. You would send to NARA St. Louis, most likely, a standard form 180. And the SF 180 is among the material that I shared with the group. If it's a Marine, it goes to Quantico, but every Navy might go to Tennessee, and then Army and Army Air Force stuff go to St. Louis, Missouri. Now the problem with Army and Army Air Force personnel files, so the standard, what we describe as military service file, the Army is using a decimal series, so it's a 201 file. That's what it is. There was a massive fire at the Federal Record Center in St. Louis in 1973 that destroyed a significant part of the U.S. Army personnel file collection and U.S. Army Air Force personnel file collection. That being said, file the request anyways. If this is next of kin for you, you have no problem. Many of these records are now considered to be archival historical materials, so anybody could request them, but you're likely to have a different review process if you're just an individual researcher looking into a person, because those files can contain a lot of information, including medical records and disciplinary materials. So again, retain the ability to be surprised. But absolutely, so there's an SF 180, and that's for individuals that survived the war. Yeah.
Now, what if they say they looked and they can't find them because they were part of the fight?
So they do have a process in place there. So everybody I've requested from St. Louis, their files have been destroyed. So I know what they look like, those files look like. They can often do work on our behalf to confirm that the individual was actually in the service. So they before being digitized, like they had all the morning reports out in St. Louis. And so they can confirm that a person was, say, in the Army. And that is often really important for benefits purposes. But they'll send you a note to confirm, okay, we've done a search of adjacent records and we can confirm that this individual is in the United States Army. But beyond that, it's not very useful. So that's all I got. That is a challenge. So then you need to take what you do have and drive it in a different direction. Like, do you know what unit, for instance?
I can't remember what was on the form.
Yeah.
But it's at home.
Yeah. Do you have any mail from your service member?
No.
Yeah. Because the mail will often be just chock full of clues. Yeah. But all of my experiences with the 201 personnel files have been files destroyed. Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the books that were published immediately after the war by the divisions? Usually, I know my dad has one, the 38th Division, that has a lot of general information about what the whole division, the battles they were in, and other units.
Absolutely. So, and there are even, so the divisional level is great. Regimental histories are really good. So after World War II, so I'm glad you mentioned this. So after World War II, most units of any significant size get themselves organized and write a history. It is designed principally for the purpose of giving an individual service member something to take home. So you'll often see publication dates in 1946, very common, they're published in 46, and they're printed on presses overseas. So a lot of German presses, Austrian presses, France, you'll see, Manila, Philippines. But yes, so there's this flurry of unit history writing after the war, and they can contain incredibly useful information. They all rhyme. Our unit was the best unit in the entire war, and we won the war. So be ready for that. like as a consumer. Later, the Army puts together what's called the Green Book series. The Navy does an official history of the United States Navy. The Marine Corps does it as well. There's an official history of the United States Army Air Forces. So the services employ professional historians to write longer, more sophisticated histories. And they're usually sort of organized by geographic area. And those are published from the early 1950s through the mid-1960s. They're the next step, sort of in understanding the history of the unit, or the historiography of the unit. So the regimental history, so you have the raw records, right, up in College Park, and then some staff officer will get tasked with writing a history for everybody to take home. And then the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, or Air Force came in and wrote these more sweeping sort of professional histories, and then academic historians come in after that. So that's the arc of the historiography to that.
Is there a digital database of these paper fragile documents that we could go to?
I wish. So that is the problem. So the volume of materials that are available, so some important stuff has been digitized, absolutely. And so Ancestry.com and associate sort of entities have digitized some important record groups. The Navy muster rolls, so which we used to put Bailey on the Farragut. That stuff has been digitized, and if you have an Ancestry.com subscription, you can access that, or perhaps the public has access to that in this library or on campus. I know there are library editions of Ancestry.com. But unfortunately, the vast majority of primary sources connected with World War II still exist only in a paper form. And while there are catalogs that you can search to locate types of records at the National Archives, the vast majority of it is still in a paper form. And we have a long, long way to go until we ever get that digitized. Yes, sir.
So a deceased member of the Army Air Force would be, his records would be in St. Louis, not in Maxwell Airport.
St. Louis. Yep. So it's so a deceased member of the Army Air Forces is Army, and all that material is in St. Louis. Yes. Yeah. But the stuff down in Maxwell is awesome. So I don't know if.
Well, each fund department money for China stuff.
Okay.
So that.
Yeah, so all those, so we just try to figure out I can easily help you sort of figure out what elements of the U.S. Army Air Forces are flying those missions. I don't know that off the top of my head. And then the unit records are down in St. Louis, at Maxwell, and then pair that up with personnel records from St. Louis. Yes, sir?
My father went in as a member of the U.S. Army, but I think his unit was converted. I found one little snippet that said that unit converted to the U.S. Army Air Force. Where would I look for his records?
It's Army records. Yeah, so your father was an anti-aircraft artillery member. And so at the National Archives, if you know the unit number, so I would start with 34 and just start going through anti-aircraft artillery units, AAA units. So the starting point for that is there are the records of the Adjutant General. So every unit wrote a monthly report and then sent it to Washington. Like every unit on Earth wrote a monthly report and sent it to Washington. And so they're collected in the records of the Adjutant General. That's Record Group 407 in College Park. None of this has been digitized. But they have finding aids, old school finding aids, 20th century stuff, binders on the shelf. So you pull the button, the binders, they start big, so theater, and they go really small, down in some cases to like separate companies or non-divisional assets. And so I'm sure they're there. And so so for instance, with the laundry company, like we didn't know, so there was only a reference in the newspaper to a quartermaster unit, who knows, right? 457. So all we did was start going into independent quartermaster companies and say, well, who's 457? And it happened to be a laundry company. Like, so you don't need complete information to find it. But unfortunately, those records are accessible using finding aids, physical finding aids on the shelf at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. Yes?
Be any difference in researching CVs than it would for regular Army or?
No. Yeah, so would it be any different? So these are Navy engineers. CVs, would this be different than working any other? No, absolutely not. And so I in fact haven't done anything with the CVs over the course of my professional life, but I can imagine, I mean, those records would either be at the Navy Yard or would also be at the National Archives in College Park. Yeah, so again, if we could figure out, find a unit, and that would unlock the door. Yeah.
I got a question, sir.
Yes, sir.
My father told us that he was videoed on a battle on Luzon.
Okay.
And I know where, and I can pinpoint the date because he was wounded that day. So if that movie exists, where would I look for it?
So it depends who actually did it. So the question was, where would combat footage be from Luzon 1945? Probably, right? 40.
Yeah, I believe it was March of 45.
Yeah, so was he with the 149th Infantry Regiment?
I'm sorry.
Do you know the regiment?
3rd Aero Division, 127th Infantry.
Okay. Yeah. So most likely that footage was taken by the U.S. Army Signal Corps. All the Signal Corps material is at the National Archives in College Park, including a still picture collection, and their moving picture collection is up there as well. A lot of their photos have been digitized, but I don't know what the status is of the digitization of the reel-to-reel films. But College Park, Maryland. And you could it's probably tagged, so the photos are tagged by the cut line or caption information. So you can search the Army Signal Corps photos by location, among other things. And
It was a particular, it was the Villa Trail.
Yep.
On Luzon.
Yeah. So again, assuming that was the official U.S. government work, I'm going to assume that was Army Signal Corps crew that would have filmed that. So College Park, Record Group 111. Yeah. Which would be amazing to find.
And then I'd have to look for it and hope I recognize it because he had
Yeah.
shaped it.
The team at the National Archives has done a remarkable job digitizing photographs. So I think much of Record Group 111, which is a large collection of photographs that Army personnel took during World War II. Actually, the collection goes back to the Spanish-American War, I think, and then goes through Korea. They've done a remarkable job digitizing those materials. So on the National Archives website, I think you can search for still photos. I don't know what the status of the moving picture digitization drive is at this time. But yeah, that would be in College Park. Yeah.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there assistance when somebody goes to College Park and do they have help?
Yes, they do. So there are professional reference libraries that are there to help. The facility is terrific. It's a modern state-of-the-art archival facility, and it's organized by type of media. And so if you want still pictures, you would go to the still picture sort of space. If you want moving pictures, you go to the moving picture floor. If you want maps, there's a cartographic sort of space. If you want textual records, there's a huge textual record place. Within each of those different domains, there are reference librarians and archivists who are there to help you. It can be helpful to send them a note before you go, but a lot of times you can make great progress just on the fly. And they're well staffed. So, yes.
So our Marines that were, if I can't get to Quantico, can you pay the staff? Are they that accessible, or will I need to actually plan a visit and go myself sometime?
Yeah, the question is Quantico. So you probably want to go because it would be amazing to go, but just send them an email and say, please. I know when they come back to work, they would love to help you. Yeah, they would love to help you. I know a number of the historians that are with the Marine Corps History Division there. They're great historians. They love serving people and love helping people figure out, something of themselves by again, learning about their Marine. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then if you wanted to do an SF 180, I think that actually gets mailed to Quantico.
Okay.
So if you wanted to request personnel files for a survivor, that I think gets addressed to Quantico, not to St. Louis. Yeah. Yeah, but just send them an email or give them a call. We've had a number of research projects that are based in Marine Corps history, and have had nothing but just terrific experiences with the team in Quantico. Yes?
You talked about the Calhoun guy that was recommended for the Medal of Honor.
Yes.
Is there any way to push that through now? Is it too long?
So the question was about the young man who was recommended for the Medal of Honor on the approach to Leyte. And the question was, is there any way to push that through? And I think would be a political thing to take perhaps to your congressman or woman, I'm not sure who represents Calloway County. Say, hey, here are the records. Whatever happened to this request? So, yes, ma'am.
I don't know what you have planned for the rest of the workshop, but I am so overwhelmed with information right now, I'm not sure even what questions to ask. So, if we sort through the documents that you sent us, the electronic documents,
Yes, ma'am.
will we learn how to ask those questions?
Well, so that's my hope, is that this is an introduction to the method, and that you'll be able to do this yourself going forward. But my contact information is all over this material. If there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know.
Good to know.
Yeah. It's so much fun to do. And again, I just encourage you to retain the ability to be surprised. You will find things you do not expect to find. And you'll encounter research challenges. And I guess that's going back to the importance of community. This can be done on an individual level, or a family can do this. And there's joy to that. But in engaging a coalition more broadly, there are a lot of fresh ideas, and when you encounter a roadblock, you can have somebody to talk to, and then suddenly things will start to rhyme. And you'll realize you're not the only descendant of somebody from the 149th Infantry Regiment. And then you start stitching these things together in a way that not only changes you at a personal level or your family, but you start stitching these things together in a way that can impact the community.
Well, my father was my source. I grew up listening to his World War II experiences, and my impression was a large number of young men from Calloway County were together.
Yes.
So I think that this whole community concept would work here.
Yes. Well, there are so many stories. There's one story I wrote about 3 triplets.
Yeah, the Sheffield.
Is that, yeah. So I would imagine they eventually did get separated, but I think that was on the website. Yeah, it usually doesn't work like that. But it's a great sentiment. Yeah, and then once you figure out too, and again, the obvious one to me, based on the work that I did in advance of this presentation, is the regiment that was in the Philippines. Just go on and just grabbing the records, and then engaging students at Murray State, and then engaging some teachers from the local high school and working through the records. I found 3 individuals from that one regiment in the small amount of work that we did preparing for this presentation. So I think there are incredible opportunities. I think there's probably 15. You're looking at 3,000 individuals from this community that were in the armed services during World War II. I imagine there's at least 15 based on the random sampling that we did. So. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, as we discover information about, like say my dad,
Yes.
what do I do with it? Do I write it up like a book, or do I don't know what to do with it.
So again, I think that's the reason this is so important to do this as a coalition or a community. So you have the Genealogical and Historical Society. Is there some way to partner with a local repository, right, to figure out, like, as you're capturing or encountering records, like, how can you bundle this together and ensure that it's available 100 years from now? So how are we going to capture, like, the information? And then once we have that knowledge, like, how do you perpetuate it? How do we make sure it's available, it's preserved for posterity? And so there might be opportunities to partner with local repositories to sort of start accessioning material. A lot of the material you may encounter may actually be digital. How do you want to get it organized? Like, how is this an opportunity to link with perhaps Murray State again? And I think the public school system here is an awesome partner for the Genealogical and Historical Society. That's an important question you all have to answer. Because once you have the material, what are you going to do with it? And I don't know if any of y'all have ideas about that.
Well, it was my understanding, and Bobby, you clarified this, please, when we met with the Ledger and Times publishers, they are going to reprint Heroes tabloid, but they were also open to including individual stories as part of that reprint. So would that be a beginning way of compiling all this?
Martha's here. I'm here.
So chime in, Martha.
I mean, I have a few stories, not a lot of stories. I have a lot of new photos that were not included in Heroes, with a little bit of information about what part of the branch of service they were or whatever. But I have very few stories, just like you talking about your father telling you stuff. Marcia Tucker did the best one I've ever read so far, and it detailed her dad during his service and what he encountered, and it was really good. But that's probably only the second or third one I've gotten like that.
Well,
And I'm very willing to
there's
put it in.
definitely
I
a
just don't.
deadline for when you can accept those stories,
Right.
right?
Pretty much. I mean, we're trying to put it all together now, but I could probably sneak in a few. I could probably sneak a few more in, but we're trying to, get it all together, because it's going to probably be a 200-page
Yeah.
document by the time we're through with it all. So, yeah. But I still would welcome stories. And if something were to happen that it couldn't go into this edition, I probably could still publish them. I'd find a way.
The stories your dad told me aren't publishable.
He was a good storyteller.
My dad told me if you could.
Yes, ma'am.
Question. My father was in charge of the arsenal in St. Louis, and every time they called it, the colonel would say, I have to have it. But I don't know how to find the records of that.
Ordnance, so the Ordnance Bureau, so there are Ordnance Bureau records. Ordnance Bureau records. And I don't recall exactly what record group number that is. And they are generally, so the headquarters, sort of national level material is in Washington, but they tend to be geographically dispersed. And there are NARA facilities, National Archives facilities all over the country. So I would expect that they may actually be in St. Louis also.
Is that for civilians? Is that for
It would be the arsenal, so it would be the arsenal records, and so they would include probably all personnel involved with that, including civilian employees. Yeah. So we were looking at, for instance, Ordnance Bureau records connected with overseas arms manufacturing during the Korean War period, and found some great records from arms manufacturers abroad that we were hiring to produce military items for the U.S. government during the Korean War. So for instance, but yeah, that record group's really good. But I think the actual arsenal record will be at the nearest branch to where the arsenal was actually located. So in that case, if it was St. Louis, it would be in St. Louis. That wouldn't be in Washington. So their reports to Washington would be in Washington, but the actual administrative records, including, I think, probably their personnel files, would be in St. Louis. Yes, ma'am. Yes?
Was the medical corps a separate group, record group, or are they a new branch like Army?
So they're part of, all the services have their own medical systems, and so there are different record groups. A lot of the Army hospital stuff, Army and Army Air Force hospital stuff, is in College Park. Though a great location for those materials too is down at Fort Sam Houston.
This was field.
Yes.
It was, okay, field like
Yeah.
in France, Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It would be recorded and covered the way any other unit would be. Yeah. But the Army in particular has this vast array of archives that are based on function. So the quartermaster has their own library and archives in Virginia at Fort Lee. There's a medical archives and library down at Fort Sam Houston. The Women's Army archive and library is at Fort Lee also. The U.S. Army Heritage and Education Center at the War College up in Carlisle is really quite good as well. So that tends to be a central repository for all types of these sort of regimental histories and division histories that get published in 1945 and 1946. They have an amazing collection of that stuff. They also have a lot of papers and your individual service members. So if you know your person was a cavalry officer, 4th Cav, Western Europe or World War II, you can go up there and find papers of other individuals that were in that unit. The Army also went in the 1970s and did a veterans history survey where they mailed surveys to survivors of World War II. And of course, it was a voluntary process, so a service member could choose to respond or not to respond. But I've spent days going through those surveys, those questionnaires. So if you know a division, or really a regiment, again, we're back to regimental level, those records are really well organized. So even if you're looking for somebody, even if the collection up there, whatever regiment you're looking for, even if your relative didn't respond to that survey, there are probably 50 surveys of people that were in that unit. And then you can read those and then begin to get a sense as to what your service member's experience might have been like. Yeah, so these were the U.S. Army Veterans History Surveys during the 1970s. Yeah.
If someone was in a field hospital, not in a regular hospital, like a tent, type of thing, how would that be? Would that be through Fort Sam Houston?
Perhaps up in College. Yeah, I think that stuff would be in College Park too. So you're looking for a patient or a physician or nurse or?
Just status and details.
Yeah. So field hospitals have unit numbers, and just write down the unit number. Yes, ma'am.
My father was in the 27th Infantry Regiment of the 25th Infantry Division, Guadalcanal, different islands, Luzon, and so on. Yeah. Where would I best find any detailed letters on that?
College Park. Yeah, the National Archives in College Park. It's interesting to me in this community, and maybe this I'll find a logical explanation for it, but how many of your service members are ending up in the Pacific Theater? Yeah, it's remarkable. But yeah, there are a lot of folks from this community are involved in the reconquest of the Philippines in 44 and 45. So I'm delighted to stay with you all as long as you'll have me. I know some of you brought documents. I'd be happy to look at documents with you all. But just again, know how much I appreciate the invitation, how much I appreciate the opportunity to spend the afternoon with you. I hope that you have found this to be useful as much as I have found it to be enjoyable. And again, thank you to our colleagues from the Pogue Library and the Historical Society. This has been terrific. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brad. He's going to stick around, so please feel comfortable. He's, I think, very willing to help you with your specific questions, and if you brought documents, please be sure and check with him.